This time on Psychic Investigators. A swimming instructor is found stabbed to death in a quiet Florida town.
Someone couldn't have walked out of it that wasn't covered with blood.
But the case is going nowhere, fast.
There was no physical evidence to arrest him.
Until a psychic claims to see the killer.
It's just a disgusting crime of extreme terror.
But are his visions enough to crack the case?
He says, the killer's nearby, the killer's nearby.
(1977), Boynton Beach, Florida, an hour north of Miami. A quiet coastal town where people escape the troubles of everyday life. Violent crime generally happens someplace else. It's August, and Mae Wentz, a part-time swimming instructor, has run into trouble with her neighbors. Mae, unmarried and living alone, has a habit of leaving her door open for her beloved German Shepherd, Duke.
She would let her dog run loose and became a problem with the town. The neighbors complaining about dumping garbage cans and so forth.
By August 5th, her neighbors are so fed up, they report the dog. Duke is caught and taken to the pound. Days go by, and neighbors expect to see Mae looking for her dog, but there's no sign of her. Duke has been left stranded. Finally, on Sunday, August 7th, a worried neighbor checks in and smells a strange odor coming from the bedroom and immediately calls the police.
Mae Wentz was lying on the floor next to the bed. She had been stabbed.
Sergeant John DiBattista was the first on the scene.
There was a lot of blood all over the bedroom, on the walls, on the bed, on the floor.
Lieutenant Ed Hillary is the lead investigator in the case.
There were two pieces of a knife at the crime scene. One was the point of the knife, and then one was a broken part of the blade. We never found the handle.
Aside from this, the killer has left little evidence.
We were able to lift several latent fingerprints, but they were subsequently identified as belonging to Mae Wentz.
From the state of decomposition, police determine how long Mae Wentz has been dead.
We had a possible time span when the crime occurred, and that was 2 to 3 days.
But this only makes things harder for the police. It's the first 48 hours that are the most crucial in any murder investigation, and those hours are gone. Adding to the mystery, nothing in the house seems misplaced, ruling out robbery as a motive. And the autopsy later confirms that there was no sexual assault. Her only enemies, it seems, are feuding neighbors.
We had no reports of cars leaving the area quickly or anything like that, so we had the feeling, with the blood all over the walls, someone couldn't have walked out of it that wasn't covered with blood. If they went any distance, possibly someone would see him. We figured it was somebody nearby.
With little evidence, the detectives have their work cut out for them. The police contact Mae's family in New Jersey with the news.
I was shocked. There were all kinds of questions running through your mind that, what could have happened? Who could have done this?
The very concept that there might be someone out there randomly attacking women is always alarming to the community.
Laura Belgrave covered the story for the local paper.
I think the community felt fear and something of an anxiety for it to be solved. It was a woman brutally murdered in the kind of fashion that in particular scares all women. And because no one knew who the killer was, you have to worry, is there some crazy out there? Is this someone who could break into my house? She was just an everyday person.
Over the next few days, the police learn more about the 41-year-old swimming instructor.
May was a kind and gentle and quiet person. She had a lot to give to people. She was very active with her swimming lessons. I would go up maybe every few weeks and we'd go out water skiing or just go down to the beach. It was good times.
As the police dig deeper, the mystery widens.
You ask 10 different people about May Wentz and they'll give you 10 different answers.
She didn't get along very well with neighbors. Not to the extent that, there was altercations or anything like that, but a lot of verbal stuff back and forth. They'd get a lead and they'd say, this is it, we're going to, and it would peter out. It was difficult. It could have been anybody.
But two neighbors do stand out from the crowd. Brothers Daryus and Jerry Mills both have a long history with local law enforcement. They live directly across the street from May Wentz.
They had been involved with Boynton Beach Police Department on several different occasions. Drunken, disorderly, fighting, and things like that.
With no other leads, police decide to check them out. Detective DiBattista conducts a voice stress analysis, a test similar to a lie detector. It measures psychophysiological stress responses in the human voice.
The voice stress analysis that I performed on Jerry, I asked him several questions, and he showed deception, he showed stress on several of the controlled questions. And it was my opinion that he had knowledge of the homicide. As far as Daryus Mills goes, he didn't show deception.
Based on the interviews, Detective DiBattista suspects Jerry Mills knows more than he's saying, but his hands are tied.
There was no physical evidence in which to arrest him.
All you got was sort of a floating, well, that week I might have done this or I might have done that. I was drunk, I got in a fight. That's the kind of stuff you'd get from them, but nothing you could pin them down with as to where they were.
Weeks go by, and the May Wentz case is slowly going cold. By a strange twist of fate, the National Enquirer is holding a psychic demonstration in Boynton Beach. The chief of police has been invited, but he tells Detective Ed Hillary to go in his place.
I said, you got to be kidding. I said, you want me to go see a spoon twister? He says, yeah, I want you to go up there for me because I promised him I'd be there.
Before Ed left, I said, Ed, why don't you talk to the psychic? Maybe we can get him to take a look at the May Wentz case. Ed wasn't very happy when I asked him about that, using black magic to solve homicides. But we had no physical evidence to go on. It had worked in the past. Let's try it.
At the demonstration, Detective Hillary meets with well-known psychic Phil Jordan and learns he's also deputy sheriff in his hometown of Ithaca, New York.
My psychic insights with police investigation are to perceive impressions about a crime that ordinary investigation has not been able to come up with.
The fact that he had been used to find people that were lost, find bodies, that impressed me.
The detective invites Phil Jordan to the station to look into the case. But will his psychic insights help to solve the brutal murder of May Wentz?
She's trying to fight. There's blood spattering all over.
41-year-old May Wentz is found stabbed to death in her Boynton Beach, Florida home. 4 weeks have passed. The killer is still at large. With no hard evidence and dwindling leads, detectives turn to psychic Phil Jordan for help.
And I had all the files here to give him. He said, no. I don't want to touch that. I don't want to know anything about the file. Just give me a picture.
As I looked at the picture of May Wentz, I began to perceive a lot of different things. I felt her to be a very independent woman. I felt she was a good person, but very much an individual, very much to herself. I see that she's a twin. I see a pink house. I began to sense things about the murder itself. And I see them violently stabbing Mae Wentz.
Phil Jordan is dead right about the way Mae Wentz died.
From not knowing anything about it, told us that she was stabbed. It was pretty amazing.
Even more astounding, Mae did have a twin, her sister Loretta.
The fact that he knew that there was a twin before we did certainly impressed me.
The police are also intrigued at the mention of a pink house.
They took me to the scene of the crime. They told me that this was the house the crime occurred in, and I was taken back a bit because I perceived the house to be pink in color.
As it turns out, the house was pink.
We noticed right away that the house was a different color because the owner of the house had repainted it after it was cleaned up, and I guess he was getting ready to try and rent it or sell it.
I immediately felt I had to go in the house because I believed that's where the crime did occur. I had an eerie feeling about the bedroom. I stood in the doorway and I began to sense things. I see a person. I see him coming into the house. I see that he's wearing a brown uniform. I see Mae Wentz. And I see the crime beginning to be created. She's trying to fight. She was aware of who was doing it. And I see him stabbing her with a knife. Her body's being punctured with that knife. There's blood spattering all over. You actually feel the knife penetrating your own being where it penetrated her being. And then as the chaos continued, I realized that the tip of the knife was broken off. It hit a part of her body or a bone that broke the tip of the knife right off. Then I feel the need to get out of there. Something's drawing me to the outside. The person that committed this crime was close.
Phil walked across the street, and he stopped.
It's almost like a suffocating feeling of fear or paranoia overcomes you.
He says, my God, the killer's nearby, the killer's nearby.
And he's looking right at the Mills brothers' house. That really got me.
Now I'm becoming a believer because we never told him that the Mills residence was where we had suspects. It was kind of creepy.
The psychic's revelations seem to confirm what the police already suspect, that one of the Mills brothers killed Mae Wentz. But where is the rest of the broken knife?
I immediately asked myself, where would the handle of the knife be? The thing that kept coming to me was under a boat, under a boat. Where is the boat? The boat is where the perpetrator of the crime lives.
John and I both looked at the backyard looking for this boat.
But they find nothing. Phil Jordan returns to New York, leaving the police to figure out the meaning of the brown uniform and the boat.
Driving back in the car, John and I were looking at each other and say, this guy's on point with things. Let's tell the guys that we possibly should be looking for someone in a brown uniform, maybe a delivery guy. find out if we can develop any suspects in the area.
Intrigued by the psychic's vision of a boat, the detective has an idea.
John says, you know what we got to do? We have to look at those aerial photographs.
As far as aerial photographs, that's a standard operating procedure, any homicide. For the crime scene investigator to go up and take aerial photographs of the neighborhood. We went back to headquarters. The first thing we did is we checked the photographs, and we found a boat.
Phil Jordan was right. There was a boat at the Mills residence. Could this be where the murder weapon was thrown on the night of the crime?
On the day the photographs were taken, that was just shortly after the event. When Phil came, there was no boat behind the house. It had been moved.
Although the police now have evidence that there was a boat, they can't get a search warrant on the word of a psychic.
We had no reason to go on the Mills property because, you needed probable cause, and we had no probable cause.
But now, there's another twist.
Investigation brought to light that Daryus Mills worked for a landscaping company that wore brown uniforms.
Is this the brown uniform that Phil Jordan claimed to see? Prompted by the psychic's remarkable visions, Mae Wentz's neighbor, Daryus Mills, is now the prime suspect. But without any concrete evidence, how can the police prove he is the killer? A small Florida town is gripped in fear when a swimming instructor is brutally murdered in her home. With the help of psychic Phil Jordan, police now have a prime suspect in their sights, but they can do nothing.
In any murder investigation, you're going to have to be able to tie the victim and the perpetrator together. You got to have some physical evidence or eyewitness or something.
It's very frustrating that you can't make an arrest. When you know deep down that somebody committed the crime.
Sergeant DeBattista and I were particularly bummed out by this because we had a perfect record. It was a thing of pride also for us. And we were working real hard on it. That's the part that hurt, was we wanted to continue that record. We wanted to get this bad guy off the streets, and we just couldn't get it done.
The detectives believe Daryus Mills is the killer. But with no proof, the case slowly goes cold.
The investigation continued for several months till everything just sort of ran out. It was looked at less and less and less. Over 3 years, it had petered out to the point where it was a cold case until it just went away. But it didn't go away in our minds, I'll tell you that.
The community really wanted an end and a resolution to the Mae Wentz case. There was a loss that shouldn't have been. And when you go and you see a neighborhood where this has taken place, for example, it's changed somehow. It's almost in the air.
Mae's family continues to pressure the police for answers.
As a family member, you don't want the police to stop. You want them to spend every minute of the day on solving that crime. If this happened again, who would be to blame?
Over the years, psychic Phil Jordan stays in touch with detectives from his home in Ithaca, New York.
Though the investigation is cold, the psychic impressions are the same whether they would be 3 years or 23 years. You become so involved in the case that you actually feel a part of the case. And I was sure that Daryus Mills was the person involved with the crime.
But the case gathers dust on the shelf for 3.5 years, until the police unexpectedly catch a break. On March 9th, 1981, Daryus Mills is brought in on burglary charges. Police call Phil Jordan to let him know.
When I have a case where we have somebody in custody, I would either do prayers that they would turn themselves in or confess to the crime. That doesn't always have to be verbally done. That can be done just through concentrated effort and thought.
Daryus is incarcerated in the county jail. In the middle of the night, he woke up screaming and hollering. The jailer went to him. He says, I killed a woman in Boynton Beach. He says, I killed her. I killed May Wentz.
Daryus Mills tells police that voices in his head urged him to confess to May Wentz's murder. On the night of August 3rd, 1977, Daryus Mills says he went to May's house looking for sex. He claimed they had a one-night stand a few years earlier. Since she always left her door open for the dog, Daryus had easy access to the house. He had a knife. He woke her up. They started to fight. Daryus choked her and stabbed her until the knife broke. He then fled the house with the handle and threw it in his backyard.
Some of the stuff he said is just tremendous. No question about it. It was on point.
The fact that the knife had been thrown by a boat, and the fact that he knew the gentleman had a brown uniform, he lived in the neighborhood close by. I mean, these weren't things that he was just kind of guessing at.
Daryus Mills is convicted on second-degree murder charges. He is later diagnosed with schizophrenia. But could the voices that prompted Daryus Mills to confess be something else?
For me, the power of prayer is one of the strongest energies and strongest powers in the world. And I like to believe that that does have strong significance. And I believe in this case it did.
You almost have to believe in psychic power. You know, it really can't be denied.
You know, I'm not going to rule anything out. Apparently it worked.
Some people believe that psychics are fakes or phonies, but I believe that some people do have a gift or a power to be able to foresee things or visualize things.
Whatever prompted Daryus to confess, the killer is now behind bars.
Nothing is worse for an investigator than to leave an open case. I was very relieved.
That made us feel good. Bad guy zero. That's the way we felt. Having interfaced with a psychic, I was impressed. As a chief, would I talk to my investigator who's hit the wall? Yeah, I'd tell him to try a psychic.
It works. If they can help you solve a case, I think it's well worth trying.
May Wentz's family can finally begin to find closure.
It puts a spot in your heart. You've lost something that's not going to come back, but maybe the process of this being over with can begin.
Grief stops our life. In a tragic death such as May Wentz, it's hard to continue from beyond that point, especially if there's unanswered questions.
This time on Psychic Investigators, a young mother vanishes.
Send me a sign. Where are you?
And the police can't find her.
No leads came, nothing.
Until a psychic tunes into her spirit.
Little blips of things that were coming through.
And claims to see what no one else can.
Could feel her getting dizzy, heart fluttering.
But are his visions too late?
I didn't feel she was alive.
Is the damage already done?
Wasn't adding up. People involved, they got away with something.
In the shadow of New York City sits Sayreville, New Jersey. Once an industrial powerhouse, by 1996, a bedroom community. Not only do commuters cross the bridge from the big city, but drugs and the damage they do also make their way to Sayreville. On June 1st, 22-year-old single mom Nicole heads out for a night on the town with friends. The former NYU student lives at home with her parents, leaving her 16-month-old daughter Dylan in their care.
She was a good mother. I thought, oh, she's going to be asking me to babysit all the time, and I was just out of all that stuff, and I only had one child, and I didn't want to get back into that, and she didn't. Maybe once a month, you know, she'd ask me to babysit, and always after Dylan was already sleeping at night.
But when Nicole fails to return home that night, her parents know something is very wrong. Recently, Nicole has been hanging out with a bad crowd, with a taste for booze and drugs.
I knew that if she didn't come home and didn't let us know something was wrong, that she couldn't.
The next morning, Nicole's father, Jerry, now deceased, heads straight to the Sayreville police to file a missing persons report. Detective Jim Novak is put in charge of the case.
Parents know if something's really wrong with their child. So what do you think? Mr. Rokas came out and said that I think she's dead.
Before you suspect foul play, you try and rule out all of the other common things that normally you find in a missing persons case, especially an adult. There's really no crime to be a missing person.
A description of Nicole and her vehicle, a black 1980 Chevy Malibu, are fed into the National Crime Information Computer System.
To see if any other police department in the United States ever had contact with that license plate. And there was no one that ran her license plate, or her car wasn't found somewhere and run by the police.
Jerry Arokas gives Detective Novak details about his daughter. She didn't like to drive her own car, especially at night. And he wasn't too fond of her choice of friends.
He didn't particularly care for her boyfriend, Michael Reed.
Detective Novak knows Mike Reed. Reed is a suspect in a recent string of car burglaries.
I always thought he was the best liar I've ever met. He would lie to me and smile as he did it. It was almost like Charles Manson type thing.
But her father's biggest fear is that his daughter's recent drug habit, heroin, might have something to do with her disappearance. Detectives start by interviewing some of Nicole's friends, Eric Nordling, Todd Connors, and Mike Reed.
Detectives went into the house to check the house for Nicole. Other detectives interviewed the three occupants, Eric, Todd, and Michael.
And everyone denied having any further contact other than seeing Nicole leave that night to go what they called out to several bars to do some drinking.
As we were leaving, Michael called to me. He said, Mr. Novak, I want you to know, I didn't love Nicole. We were only friends. I looked at Detective Sergeant Sprague, and simultaneously we said to each other, she's dead. And the reason we felt that way is because he used the past tense, and there was no reason at this point to think of Nicole as anything else than in the present. Unless there was.
But what? There's no evidence to back up a feeling. They continue to pursue the missing persons case, contacting local hospitals, checking towing reports, and connecting with state police. 2 days go by, and there is no sign of Nicole or her car.
At this point in the investigation, we had no leads.
Once you don't come home for a number of days and no one hears from you for a number of days, now this person is really maybe not just a missing person on their own account, but maybe in fact some kind of foul play may have occurred here.
I would go out on the back porch every night and just look around and say, just send me a sign, something. Where are you? I know you're out here somewhere.
Desperate for any answers, the family is willing to try anything.
My uncle Walt Werner worked for the Hackensack Police Department, and he suggested a psychic that the police force sometimes used.
Frank St. James lives in New Jersey and has a reputation for finding missing persons.
I'm like a human satellite or something, going anywhere. Little blips of things I could draw in, get real close. Sometimes they come really quick in flashes. It's like looking through their eyes.
But his one rule? No immediate family members in the session. Diane Macaluso, Pat Arokas's best friend, goes in her place.
My husband and I took a tape recorder with us to record the session, and we took a picture of Nicole with us.
And what the picture shows him, no one really wants to hear.
I tell you, I don't have a good feeling about it. She did expire sometime Sunday morning.
Single mother Nicole Arokas of Sayreville, New Jersey has been missing for 3 days. Psychic Frank St. James says she's dead.
She did expire sometime Sunday morning.
Oh, my heart sank when I heard that because I was still hoping that maybe she just went off with friends.
The psychic claims to be picking up images of Nicole from the night she went out with friends.
I pick up some drugs Saturday. The turnpike is off of there on one of those little side roads. She's not moving. She's not too far from home. I do feel something by Thursday.
Is the psychic right? Will they find Nicole by Thursday?
I didn't have hope that she was alive. I knew that when she didn't contact us and didn't come home, I knew it. But I just had to find her.
The Arokas invite the psychic to their home. Maybe here he can get a clearer picture of where their daughter might be. Left alone, he moves through the house. It's in the kitchen where Frank claims to connect with Nicole's spirit.
Nicole started to come through really easy. It looked like I was flying up above, near water, a dirt road, bridges, cattails, or her car in the marsh. One of the wheels was in the water. A feeling of closed in. I felt that if I was standing 25 feet away from where she was, I wouldn't be able to see her. I couldn't see it from the road. The only way is from above.
Nicole's father takes the tape of both psychic sessions to Detective Novak. The investigator is skeptical, but he's also reached a dead end.
I am not so naive to think that just because I don't have this special ability doesn't mean it wasn't given to someone else. No leads came, nothing. And it's not like we sat on our hands. I thought it doesn't hurt. Began checking all the areas that would resemble areas described by the psychic. There was an old railroad bridge, area where it was tall cattails, area where it was marshy land, ponds, lakes. We came up negative.
And then the detective remembers something else the psychic had said.
Have they tried a helicopter in any of those particular areas?
We're only 3 days into the investigation at this point, and I'm going to ask for a helicopter, because I felt I was going to meet with the resistance.
But the next day, Novak gets his helicopter. It's Thursday, June the 6th.
One of the pilots asked why we're using the state police helicopter. And I said, well, we're following the leads of a psychic with respect to a missing person. I'm saying to myself, oh, please, God, please let us find something. Because if we don't, I am never going to live this down.
5 minutes later, above a secluded marshy area, very similar to what the psychic visualized, they do spot something.
The pilot asked what type of vehicle we were looking for, and I explained to him it was a black Chevy we were looking for. At that point, he said, I think I see something down in the weeds right along the Raritan Bay. As the helicopter made several circles above it to find a landing spot where we could land the helicopter, you could see that there was, in fact, someone inside the vehicle.
But what they see from the air is not so easy to see on the ground.
Well, it was necessary to land on the beach area because of the tall cattails and debris. It was a landfill, maybe a mile square, just covered with the cattails. You couldn't see anything. We each went in different directions, and as I approached this one curve, I was surprised because suddenly I saw the car, maybe 25 feet from the curve. The psychic indicated that you could be 25 feet from the car and not see it.
The psychic had also said that he had a bad feeling about Nicole, that she was dead.
Look in and I see the remains of what appeared to be a female. I noticed the position of her body. Car doors were locked. I radioed in the registration, confirmed that it was in fact Nicole's car.
Once we opened the door of the vehicle, she didn't appear to be seated behind the driver's seat, that she happened to be more in the center of the vehicle between the driver's and the passenger side, that the vehicle was still in gear and the ignition wasn't all the way on.
Inside, police find a letter in Nicole's purse, dated June 1st, the night she disappeared.
That appeared to be a semi-suicide note. Yet, there was no evidence that a suicide had occurred here.
I remember being happy that they found her. But it was like I wanted to pass out and I couldn't. I was like halfway, but you know.
My heart just ached for Pat and Jerry and Dylan.
The autopsy finds the cause of death acute morphine toxicity, a heroin overdose. The county prosecutor rules her death as suicide, but was it?
It didn't make any sense to me that she would do that.
It doesn't add up for the detectives either. First, there's Nicole's letter found in her purse.
The ink on a date was a different color than the body of the letter, and I thought that was strange.
Her mother confirms that Nicole often recorded her feelings, however dark.
Nothing that went through her mind wasn't written down somewhere. Because she was living a dangerous life, and in case something happened, she wanted to make sure that people knew things, especially Dylan.
Then, the location of the car.
And I kept in mind what Nicole's father had told me. She didn't like driving at night, and she would have to drive over discarded railroad ties and roofing material that was discarded in the area. There was no way that Nicole drove herself to this particular location, especially at night. Somebody had to have driven her car there.
And some of the things that really stood out were what wasn't there. No drug paraphernalia, there was no needles, no syringes, other than a ligature on the floor.
And then Detective Novak remembers what the psychic said on the tape. Nicole was not alone when she died.
There's at least 2 or 3 of them. They were there. They know what happened.
There was more to this than suicide.
"22-year-old Nicole Arokas has been found dead inside her car, abandoned in a secluded New Jersey marsh. It's ruled a suicide, but a psychic says others were involved, and the lead detective thinks so too.
Anyone reading that letter could easily draw the logical conclusion that this was a suicide. However, they didn't have the information that I had. Her boyfriend, on the first day of the investigation, referred to Nicole in the past tense. The position of her body, the fact that the car was locked.
Most families, once a loved one commits suicide, kind of realize after looking back that the signs of suicide were there. They were depressed or they were having some type of problem. The parents were pretty insistent that they didn't believe that Nicole had taken her own life. And if she did in fact do that, then the crime scene would have been totally different. Usually when you die from a heroin overdose, the death is pretty instantaneous to the injection. There isn't time to remove the syringe from the vehicle, clean up the papers, dust off the dashboard, and make the car kind of neat. If you're going to inject yourself, you probably would have the car in park. The vehicle had actually been left in gear. If she had been, say, trying to leave the scene and all of a sudden the overdose kicked in and killed her, then that vehicle would have run out of gas before the police found her. Yet once we put the vehicle in neutral and turned the key on, it started right up. The suicide note was folded up in her pocketbook. You would probably leave it out in the vehicle. So everything that seemed to be a suicide just didn't seem to be adding up.
If she didn't commit suicide, how did she die? Novak suspects Todd Connors, Eric Nordling, and her boyfriend, Mike Reed.
Couldn't imagine why people I suspected would do such a thing to a friend.
For the detectives, there seems to be only one answer.
Under New Jersey law, if you cause someone's death by giving them a narcotic, it's technically a homicide.
I brought in the people involved, got nowhere.
The case is officially closed, but for Novak, it's still open.
Sometimes it's better to take a step back, let the people involved come to the belief that they got away with something, and they begin to talk and tell friends.
Over the next 3 months, his strategy starts to pay off.
Just as much as I was repulsed by what had happened to Nicole, the friends of Eric, Todd, and Mike Reed were just as repulsed, because we began getting information through informants with respect to what is being said. Mike Reed shot up Nicole, and she OD'd, and he dumped her out in the landfill.
That information wouldn't have been admissible in court because it's hearsay.
To have any chance of charging Mike Reed, they need confessions from the people who were with Nicole when she died. They keep waiting.
After the call was processed at police headquarters, it was parked outside for the longest period of time. And every time I left police headquarters, I would look over at the car and I would say, "Come on, Nicole, help me out here." I repeated that probably 100 times.
For the next 3 months, the case eats away at the detective until one December night.
I was serving warrants at an apartment complex, totally unrelated to this, and I find this necklace. It was a child's necklace, the name Nicole.
Although it's not Nicole's necklace, the detective sees it as a sign.
And I thought, this is Nicole's response to me. Maybe it's time that I bring these people in and talk to them again.
But Mike Reed is in jail on an unrelated charge. So Novak brings in his friends, Eric Nordling and Todd Connors.
Eric was the first one to go in because we felt he was the weakest link. Sergeant Burns made Eric aware that he was familiar with Eric's family. His family would be disappointed with what they had done with Nicole. At that point, Eric tears up. Eric began to tell.
But Todd Connors admits to nothing.
I just confronted him. I yelled at him. "This is what you do to her? You leave her there and rot?" And he just looked away. We knew he had him. But he said he didn't want to talk anymore.
Novak needs statements from both Connors and Nordling in order to charge Mike Reed with Nicole's death. A few weeks later, he gets his chance. He brings Todd Connors in on a contempt of court warrant from a nearby town. But this time, he ups the ante. Novak brings in an investigator from the county prosecutor's office. She threatens to charge Connors with obstruction if he doesn't talk. It's Connors' last chance, and it works. Todd finally corroborates what Eric Nordling has already admitted, and what the psychic saw 6 months earlier, that Nicole was not alone when she died. According to their statements, around 8 p.m. on June 1st, 1996, Nicole, Todd, Eric, and Mike Reed head out to buy drugs. A half hour later in Perth Amboy, Nicole cashes her welfare check. At 9 p.m. in Newark, Mike Reed buys heroin. At a rest stop off the Garden State Parkway, Eric and Todd shoot up. Mike Reed shoots up Nicole. Todd and Eric fall asleep. When they come to, they're at the landfill, and Nicole is unconscious. Unable to revive her, they panic. But Mike Reed shows them the letter, the one the police initially took as a suicide note. He wipes down the car, removes all the evidence, and locks the doors. All three walk the 2 miles back to Todd Connor's house.
She would have never done that to them. That's what bothered me. Never. Even if she had to be found guilty, she would have never done that.
On December 16, 1996, Michael Reed is charged with the drug-induced death of Nicole Arokas. He pleads guilty and is sentenced to 10 years in prison. Todd Connors and Eric Nordling walk free. Obstruction charges against them are dropped in exchange for their statements.
We had nothing. We found Nicole based on the information supplied to us by the psychic, Frank St. James. And that's it. It's just, I don't see how anyone could dispute it.
I can't explain it, nor would I even attempt to. I would certainly not have a problem with talking to a psychic or talking to the devil himself if it would help us solve some of our unsolved crimes.
I've done hundreds of cases. This was particularly gratifying, I guess, too, and sad at the same time, but I felt I helped the family at least.
Nothing goes right forever. There's no closure. You never see them again. She didn't have a normal funeral. None of it was the same. Everything was messed up.